You've seen the movie. My talk is different than most other folks about ransomware and malware, and I think it's the most germane. I'm not trying to be a jerk about it. I'm not product focused, I'm process. Everything you're about to see in my presentation, you can immediately take back without a price tag and immediately affect change. So I don't care if you're a business partner, an IBMer, or the client, your actual great customers. Thank you very much for paying my salary, Mr. I. I love you, right? Z and I is the biggest thing. I bring this up first because attacks are always happening. We just don't know about them to the degree that people think they should know about them. And that's why inoculation and changing of the human behavior is the best strategy. Everything I'm doing is on my box folder, and yes, I'll upload this. I made a slight modification. It'll be up on the TechU box folder later on today. So the key thing I also focus on is everyone in this room is here because at some point you know about storage. And I would argue, instead of the security group at a customer or anything like that, the storage guy should lead. It's our data, it's our house. We should be able to do a far better job. And then we're not just talking encryption here, we're talking about access and authentication, as well as when malware or ransomware happens, that change, being able to audit. So that's my big A right there. I argue that when we start, and you'll see in my slides, when you start auditing, starting to look for weird events, you'll be able to stop ransomware and malware in its tracks and prevent a huge outage or tomorrow's news from happening to yourself or your customers. So the key thing is, everyone knows about, do not click. Now at IBM, for those IBMers, right, you know that on average we get once a month a test that we're tested by internal IBM security to see if we click. I would argue you could do the same thing, as well as making sure that everyone gets that message over and over again, because the #1 attack, and I'll bring this up right now so you guys can see it, it'll be part of my zip that I'll be uploading. I'll just make sure you guys see it. Here's the FBI report. So, United States Federal Bureau of Investigation, they have a cyber crime report every year. And the #1 that comes out, let me just skip right to it, and you'll see it in my slide deck as well. We'll just get right to it here. Payroll diversion, yep. As well as tech support fraud. Let me just make sure, I'll just leave it up here and stuff like that. And then what they call the financial institution partnerships and being able to verify certain things. The current wave isn't to attack a server. It's to find out from social media who the key players are and their administrative assistants. We call this business economic compromise or business email compromise, and we actually call this out separately here. Let me just bring this out here. There we go. And by the way, here's where you are by victims. Australia. Sorry, guys. I appreciate you guys. I know you're not necessarily the #1 or anything like that, but in terms of by victims and stuff like that, by losses, it's huge. So if I could, I'm going to go back to the slide deck in just a second here. Think about your key economic folks inside a corporation. That's the admins, anyone in finance, anyone in payroll, that they are being targeted by the various nefarious forces on social media, because once they click, if they're compromised, they'll have their funds diverted or they'll have a way into your corporation. They're not necessarily looking for information or the exchange servers anymore. All they want is the quick buck, because from a chair or a couch anywhere in the world, to be able to get access to someone's credit card information or a corporate credit card, corporate bank account, that's all they need, no matter how long they wait for it. Remember, that's the other part too. If you remember Superman 3, remember that bad movie, right? By removing 1 penny from everyone else's paycheck, you got a huge paycheck. Sorry, that's a really bad movie, but it's classic. Yeah, and that's what I would have you think about. So 1 click, yes, or it could be even on their phone. So that's the other part of the training is any of those key stakeholders in a particular organization need to have a monthly reminder of not to click, not to say, yeah, go ahead, wire all those funds emergently and stuff like that without checking through. Again, I make sure tape is not dead. Tape is one of the best air gap methods. And by the way, you'll see that my message resonates with most of the other ones you've heard. I'm just focusing on the key one that most people don't really focus on. You can have as many air gaps as you want, but you're still making a copy of maybe infected data. So I'm trying to help you stop the infection or prevent it in the first place. Our own weather channel was hit. I don't know if you heard about this particular attack. So I'm going, in this presentation, this is something you can take and you can scare people about. The weather channel went offline actually because of ransomware. So our friends at IBM actually helped them get back up. I don't know if you knew that. IBM owns the weather channel, believe it or not. Okay, making sure you knew that. And the latest one that's coming out is Linux is going under the knife. So yes, it'll look for HTML servers and it will try to encrypt all the web pages. This isn't looking for financial, it's just actually just trying to look for a ransomware payoff. So Linux is not necessarily more secure than Windows or anything else. The key thing is also, say you're traveling somewhere. Yes, that's where that social media comes into play. Maybe I'm a CIO, maybe I'm a financial analyst somewhere, and I post on my Instagram that I'm going somewhere. The bad guys are looking for those people in their cameras because even when they transfer the files, I can then get into that person's work computer when they transfer their files at the cafe or the hotel lobby. Think about this. So I want you to make sure that other people talk about locking down USB ports. That's a good idea, I get it, but this could happen either through wireless, Wi-Fi. So there's a key thing here. How long has this been going on? Oh, since the dawn of time. I have some of the bigger ones here, and when EMC, one of our biggest and our happiest competitors, Dell EMC brought up about its air gap. They were the first. So I would think about air gaps as well, but let me focus a little bit more about what's going to resonate the most here. Is it the network? Is it just the infrastructure? Or the main question, how long can you handle staying up or not staying up in case of an attack? And that's where, when people say, well, how much is your solution going to cost? I'm focusing on process. You're going to see some more slides here about how you can change process and then affect all of this without a cost. Yes, I'm affecting your process. I'm going to have you audit more things, and I'll go into that right now. IBM believes in the NIST principle, so identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. So yes, we want you to, first of all, make sure you identify, and that's where I'm going to focus the most on. Protection's easy. You have lots of backups, you have air gaps, you can replicate, you can do lots of things, and then you can take care of things. Now, I will have a few other IBM products that you can consider, but I'm not focusing on that as much. So, I don't know how often this has happened to you. In the USA, we are now averaging 1 IRS scam phone call per hour per capita. Do you understand what that means? Is that people are being called all the time in the United States with folks on call centers, and you can hear them in the background, trying to get them to turn over their credit cards or gift cards or anything else, pretending to be the Internal Revenue Service of the United States. Now, I don't know how bad that is here in Australia. My apologies. But this is huge. And they're also placing ads on Google for printer support as well as computer support. So inadvertently, your relatives, your friends, as well as employees might inadvertently click on a link that they assume is HP or EMC or IBM.com, and really it would go to the wrong website. They are on the first page of Google, by the way. That's how good some of the scammers are. This is not a joke. My sister tried to repair her printer. She clicked on the first link for HP printer repair, and she got one of these. So please, and I average about 3 or 4 phone calls a month from IRS scammers. I call this the all vector slide for a reason. It doesn't matter how someone would get in or do something. I don't know if you paid attention. The Target breach, as well as Neiman Marcus, and even UPS and Home Depot. Do you know that we haven't caught those criminals? Why? The Superman 3 approach. They were skimming off of every card transaction, pennies, and transferring it to another account. That's where the audit would have helped. It was only months, literally 9 months later, where we realized that funds were being diverted to another account and they stopped it. But by that time, the guys had already, or the entities, had already left. So in other words, your point of sale device could be infected. Contractors could inject code into a database to simply move funds from one place to another. So don't think of ransomware as a virus or something like that. It could be simply a database trigger or moving of files or assets from one place to another. So I'm going to bring this up. If you're in the hospitals, I can't tell you how many hospitals I've gone to and their wireless network isn't even secure. That is a huge data breach if you think about it, and the fact that I could be in the parking lot and I could grab people's confidential files. Now that's the other big thing that's coming up, is that in the United States, you can bill as part of Medicare, Medicaid, once you have someone's information. So in other words, I could be a victim just because someone has my medical information and they would bill on my behalf for a doctor visit I never went to. So think about that from a malware, ransomware perspective as well. The data itself is valuable. Just by having my information, they can bill stuff. If I could, here's the other thing from the crime report, which I just brought up. The amount of nasty, face-to-face violent crimes, believe it or not, in the United States is going down a little bit. See, I'm actually going down a little bit. Motor vehicle theft was up a little bit, but it went down in 2018, and we expect to go down in 2019. The biggest thing is bank robberies that I want to focus on are way down. Why should you go into a bank with a gun and risk getting arrested or scanned or being able to leave DNA traces when from the comfort of your couch or a chair, you can actually steal from somewhere else without being caught? So the key thing is you can do it. And I brought this up earlier, but I'll make you see it in the actual tables right here. We're talking in trillions. The business economic or the economic account compromise, EAC, you'll see a little bit more. You're right, and then the other one that's coming up here, confidence. In other words, people saying, oh, can you send me some money, please? You know, the romance, oh, hey, blah, blah, blah. Social media is coming up and being leveraged for people to be taken advantage of. So that's another key thing for all your key stakeholders, regardless of their situation, if they're married, divorced, whatever, making sure they don't fall for certain, shall we say, phishing attacks or other attacks. Now, the other big thing, you know that Equifax lost all of our data pretty much. This is something that still hasn't been rectified. So you'd say to me, gee, Andrew, how do we get past that? Well, if you're lucky, you're going to call your bank and you're going to change all your information. Great. This is part of the reason why I said that air-gapped networks are only one part of the solution. I get it. But these attacks actually go through air gaps. You're like, how can it go through the air gap? It's so good that it actually will infect a backup and you won't be able to see that change until it's too late. And they're encrypted viruses as well. We don't even know what some of these do. I'll bring that up in a second here. So when some people focus on, oh yeah, you know, antivirus is going to be the way, or firewalls are going to be the way, and I'll go into them in just a second, they're looking for a signature. They're looking for a particular set of behaviors. I argue we can actually get to those behaviors before they actually happen. And this is just the earlier one. Now this actually is over 10 years ago. This is one of the first ones that hit Windows, and we call it the dawn of encrypted malware for a reason. We still don't know what it does because it actually randomly changes itself. It's like the common cold. Every year or every mutation is completely different. So that's why when some people tell me about antivirus, oh, I've got intrusion detection systems, they're looking for signatures that will always be changing. So they're always a step behind. Hence my step ahead by putting the noggin to work, basically, or your brain to say, wait a second, maybe I shouldn't click, maybe I shouldn't say yes to this particular phone call, hang up, etc. Here's another one, the Godot model and stuff like that. You can take a look at all the different counters that we've been able to find out about. Some of them, this is Gauss, basically. So the other thing that really bothers me is people are profiting from this. We now have what's called cyber crime as a service. So right now, even your employees, if they're not happy with their boss or anything like that, they can actually grab their own cybercrime as a service kit and actually install that. So I want you to be aware of that, that your employees, as well as contractors, who have no experience whatsoever, they could inadvertently or on purpose launch stuff inside your corporate walls. Now, I mentioned this before, but everyone wants to see it in print, BEC, or the business email compromise. And that's where I said before about the stakeholders, but I want to make sure you have it in print so you can actually see this. And I wanted to make sure everyone sees this as well. This is the new attack method. Yes, you've heard about certain viruses and all the other stuff, but you know what? That is looking for a particular vector, and it's becoming smaller and smaller. The better ones are looking here. An email that looks exactly like their standard one, and I'll show you some more examples as well, that someone can inadvertently, from their phone, click on the wrong response. And remember, that's the other thing I'll bring up too. You'll see the phone now is another vector, because with Bluetooth turned on or Wi-Fi hotspots, that same CEO, when he or she is traveling, could inadvertently click on the wrong link, could inadvertently give away certain passwords, certain access points, and again, they're off to the races for bank accounts and transfers. So please ask questions if you want, just making sure. Which one is the right one, everybody? I know, go ahead. How good are you at spotting it?
The one on the right. Yeah. Oh, sorry, the one on the left is the right one. Left is the right one.
So you're saying the left one is the valid one. Is that fair enough?
Yeah, but that one's got com dash.
It's secure.
It's not just that. I mean,
one's
just look
signed.
at the signatory on the certificate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's the key thing. Our folks are using secure certificates so that it looks exactly like the original. And it's only certain small changes that are the tip-offs. So I would argue, how about this? From everything I've mentioned, I'm giving you one easy audit. Anyone who's using a work phone should not be using a work phone. I know this sounds crazy for personal stuff because of the crossover. The minute your work phone becomes compromised, theoretically, they have access to certain things. And I know that doesn't sound very, very fun. I know, I get it. It's very easy to combine certain functions on your phone. But what happens if you're the victim or they use your credentials? That's what happened in Atlanta. They're still spending well over $3 million to clean up. That's the city of Atlanta.
Do the apps that split your phone in half work? That separate
you saw that my personal phone is recording me now.
Yeah.
So no offense, that's where you could say, and I'm not trying to be mean either, as a corporate administrator, you could say, look, if you are in finance, if you're in engineering, if you're in HR, if you're going to do any work-related work on a work phone, we're going to lock that phone down to just certain functions. No offense. You can make your phone calls wherever you want, but we won't have you do any personal sites. Facebook, Instagram, I mean, you get the idea. Any social media is a vector now for the wrong link or to inadvertently give information. And that sounds crazy, but it's until the behavior changes. It's all about behavior, and you'll see a little bit more about that. So the update on this, I just want to make sure. This one was more of a classic attack. They infected a couple people's computers. They went and then mapped out the entire city of Atlanta and then looked around for whatever they could find and then finally executed. Equifax I brought up earlier. So the key thing is that I want you to see is distributed denial of service is actually hitting phones too. So if a phone is compromised, it can also be used later on to attack other devices, some without people's knowing. Think about that for a second. You use your phone, you know when it's actually calling or when you're actually on a website. But what happens if your phone is actually attacking other computers? You wouldn't know because that app was hidden or installed. And as long as it has juice and it's turned on, it's actually performing an attack for somebody else, a zombie attack. So Yahoo is still trying to get through all this. This happened well before 2016. So it's not just ISPs though. I bring this up because people are like, well, what do you mean? Let me have some more examples. I'm giving you huge examples. I've talked about it, but now here's a slide about it. So macros, or in other words, Siri, for example, can also lead to this, and I'll go to that in just a second. So the phone, making sure it's locked down, and I'm not saying it's fun. I'm not. I'd rather change the behavior. The key thing is also this new one that came out of South Africa. I give them the credit. Has anyone heard about this before? This is a big one that the USA is now starting to grapple with. So you say to me, okay, Andrew, I already separated my phones. I got a personal phone, I got a work phone. This could still happen to you. What it is everyone has a SIM card. So basically, an attack vector is that they will find out something about you, your name, your social security number, if they're lucky, but probably not, or they'll just get your phone number. So name and a phone number and a little bit of personal data, maybe where you live, maybe your mailing address, who knows, just one or two. They'll then call up the carrier of your phone and say, oh my gosh, I just lost my phone, please help me. The carrier, after hearing a few of those key details, will say, okay, we know you don't have your phone, you're traveling right now, Mr. So-and-so or Miss So-and-so. We'll lock out your SIM. What's your new SIM? And the attacker will say, oh yeah, I just went to the store, I got my new SIM, can you please activate it? They'll activate it in your name, and the only thing you're gonna know on your phone is all of a sudden your phone in the upper left corner is gonna go SOS. Because all of a sudden your SIM has become invalidated on your network. And you're like, what do you mean? And it's just that simple. Within seconds. And what happens then? You know about the rest. That attacker will then go to all of your websites and say, oh yeah, I forgot my password, SMS me my password or give me the reset code. And instead of coming to your phone and your phone number, they've impersonated your phone number with their SIM and they have all your passwords. So literally within an hour, think about this for your key stakeholders again, CEOs, CFOs, administrative assistants who have access to all their passwords can immediately be reset, compromised, leveraged within 4 hours. Think about that for a second. SIM swap is a huge fraud. Now, where are we going with this? Many of the carriers are now stepping up to try to do, shall we say, a bank check. In other words, hey, is this person a high net worth individual? I'll ask some more questions. I won't do a SIM swap or I won't invalidate it without some more credentials given to me. If that person can't give me some of their bank account information or a little bit more of their key personal information, I won't perform that SIM swap. But you see how dangerous that is, right? Again, process. The person didn't do anything wrong. So that's the other thing I would have you think about. Whatever you put on Facebook or Instagram or social media, that can be used against you in a SIM type fraud situation. Please. And again, if you want to see this in a different way, here it is in text. So you can actually show this off to your employers, right? Here it is right here. Usually done within 30 minutes. And you'll never know. Think about that. So a CEO could get on a plane when he or she gets off, or a financial analyst, they get off, all their passwords are gone, changed, whatever, and they won't be able to call anybody. Not only that, our friends in Tel Aviv have come up with an ultimate. They actually scan the phone if it's got Bluetooth or Wi-Fi turned on, and they're able to scan the phone for passwords. Now right now, Apple and Android are working on this, but right now this is a known vector. They call it Pegasus. So yes, it is a device that when you come into a Wi-Fi or a Bluetooth area, it can actually, without you even unlocking your phone, without you even, as long as it's on, they'll actually be able to get into certain parts of your phone and get those from the cache, believe it or not. And so we're worried about that one a little bit. Hence, again, why personal phone versus work phone, right? I get it. Now, here's the best one. I love this. This is the best. Does anyone know about ultrasound? Not for babies, of course, but, you know, real ultrasound. No. All right, all right. As a guy who enjoys stereo sound, ultrasound and ultrasonic speakers have been used for a long time. Has everyone been to Disney World? Disneyland? Euro Disney, something like that? I don't know if you've gone to some of the museums there, but if you noticed, it wasn't a cacophony of sound. When you were at an exhibit, you would hear something, and then as soon as you would move away, you wouldn't hear it as much. It was about that particular. That's an ultrasonic speaker. So basically, in the ceiling is a speaker that is only making ultrasonic waves. In other words, if you're directly under it, you'll hear it. When you're not in it, like a flashlight, when you're not in that beam of sound, you won't hear it at all. It doesn't go out like a normal voice or a regular speaker. The same thing works with Siri. So we've had now attacks where people talking to Siri about unlocking phones. Siri hears the ultrasonic and unlocks the phone and does those commands, but you don't hear it. Now, the reason I brought up about ultrasonic speakers is this is good for those of us who are married or have a nice couple, right? An ultrasonic speaker in the bedroom, hold on, I know, hear me out. You aim it at one side of the bed, so in other words, that person can hear the TV or the movie or the radio, while the person next to them, because they're not in that beam of sound, will hear nothing. That's what's so great about ultrasonic speakers, is that they are very tightly focused, they don't radiate sound, and they are, quote unquote, marriage savers, right? The fact that you can be next to your significant other. I don't even make this stuff up, guys. Anyway, moving on. Moving on. The web stores. you can buy cybercrime as a service now in all the web stores. Android has more of them, but there was also some bad actors. Apple removed 4 last week, by the way. Code that actually violated terms of service. Android on a weekly basis has apps that it has to remove. So inadvertently, app installs are a problem, right? And did you see this one? It's my favorite one. Do you bring your own cable wherever you go? I hope you do. Because now, that's right, there's a cable out there that's being sold which actually will hack your phone. It's inside the actual chip, which is a mini Wi-Fi transmitter, so that when somebody plugs into that phone with that cable, it'll transmit out Wi-Fi your phone and allow them to hack your phone. It'll silently try to install an app and get access to your phone. Wow. Great stuff, huh?
What's the name of the cable for resist purchase?
Oh, I forgot exactly what they called it. I mean, if you go trust jacking, that's right. I give you and stuff like that. You'll be able to find the cable, but it looks very close to every other cable. That's why if you notice on my cables, right, I use my own, right? Oh yeah. So, just a thought. Yeah. Moving on. So we talked about the phone hacks a little bit. I'm just making sure. So even wallets. You know, digital currency, I don't know how many people are into digital currencies, that can still be hacked from an air-gapped situation. So don't think that air gaps are your 100%. Now I'm going to get to solutions next. I just want to make sure you're all set. So some people asked me earlier about Z. No, same thing. You can actually get into a Z in the same way. And I don't want to go too much. How many people are interested in Z? Okay, a few people, right? Just making sure. They will grab into your data sets. Right? Just because it's encrypted, that's external encryption. Once you have a way in on somebody's workstation or something else, you'll be able to then hijack certain things. They'll rotate the keys. They'll be able to actually get past it, but they'll have your data on a Z, right? So Z's important. And the key thing about Z then, audit. In other words, what is an audit? Don't think of an audit as a negative way. An audit is just a review of the data. I know normally when people say audits to me, I'm a little scared too, but when it comes to preventing malware, by having audits, and you'll see, I'll show you some more slides about this, you'll actually be able to prevent databases and key systems of a entity from being hacked. So Z, same thing as before. All those nice little acronyms are more Z specific, so I apologize for those who aren't as Z friendly and stuff like that. But even if you're a Linux 1, that logical partition, basically, I want you to lock down that vSwitch as well as the application. So every layer inside Z or Linux or Windows, whatever you're doing, you should always, always do best practices to lock it down. And each layer does matter. So it's all those guests. And this is the guy who put it. So what if you lock the door? So when people respond back, oh, I've got air gap. Oh, I've got a firewall. Yeah, great. You've locked the doors, but you've probably left a window somewhere else open. And people forget about that. That's why my audits matter, I think, the most, because it will take care of it. Now, I mentioned it before, but here it is now in print. The cybercrime as a service. So you can either download your own kit, you can pay somebody else to actually hack a business for you if you want. It's available right now. So right now, it's a legitimate business in other companies, other countries, that you can actually hire them to actually hack into a system. The biggest one that's next coming up is all those social medias. Depending on how big a social presence you have, that's a bigger target where they'll try to use that for a SIM swap, for any of the bank information or all the other fun stuff. Or they'll find out what company you work for, and they'll see what they could get from those other entities at that company to sign off on stuff. So some people say to me, yeah, we'll do multi-factor. Yeah, that's great. You just heard about SIM swaps, though. SIM swaps wouldn't protect you, right? In fact, SIM swaps would have a multi-factor, and everyone would have the multi-factor. The bad guys would get the multi-factor and multi-step. So what does Google do? Google actually uses good old keys that you have to plug in, USB keys. So it's not only a password, it's actually a USB key that you actually unlock the workstation with. So that's one way of doing it, making sure. Now, I brought this up earlier. This is the Superman 3 approach. Audits will prevent the worst kind of attacks, which are from your databases or from your key financial or other systems, macros or a table or a buffer manipulation. So we've seen at those key retailing sites, for example, that a contractor or someone else temporarily came in, did some work, and left behind a macro or a table, a trigger, something very small, not even true viral code, just something, shall we say, malicious, but not easily seen unless you're a DBA. And so a lot of corporations are now thinking about doing audits on their databases. So some of the better ones, every month, they split their database group in two, where you have one group checking the other group, and they're physically and logically separated so that one group is checking the other group's work to make sure that there's no hidden table or triggers or manipulations at the database that might be moving data around. It's all about behavior, though. So everything that I've talked about here, and I'm going to show you how we're going to do the audits on the rest of the fun stuff outside of DBAs, is the unexpected items. The unexpected command, the buffers like we talked about, or the database triggers. But the same thing could be done on Linux. Same thing could be done on Windows where you're copying files or making copies of keystrokes. A lot of that stuff. Not any of the other fun stuff down below. Take a look. Nothing. It's all up here and subvert. Basically being able to make copies of stuff. Yes, this is an older one about Adobe Flash. Does anyone still use Flash? No? Okay. Sorry, as you know, that's on its way out. I get it, I get it. Thank you. Thanks, I appreciate it. So, everyone, I'm sure you saw this slide, and they focus on all of these bubbles. The firewall. Oh, I've got a great firewall. Great. External attacks. Fine. Oh, I've got great antivirus. Yeah, that's great. You can find signatures. Fantastic. This is the next one I'm going to focus on. The actual operating system itself and patches is where people have fallen down. They don't do checksums. How many people, when they've installed a patch or upgrade, did you check the checksum? Raise your hand. I'm glad some of you are. Most people don't use checksums. I'll get into that next. And then, of course, the file integrity and the event logs. That is where I'm going next. You'll see that with audits, and there's automatic ways of doing a review of file systems, of databases, that you will be able to catch anomalies or the start of a ransomware attack in its tracks. And that's the key thing. So let's go through that. Again, I'm giving EMC credit because they were the first ones who really talked about their air gap. But it's the same thing as before. Making copies on tape or other systems which have no physical access. But remember, even with that air gap, you're only delaying the inevitable. If something gets infected, it's going to get to the air gap at some point. And once it is, you then have to find out which one it is and how to get around it. Now, some other folks asked me about this in other talks, making sure. We have a storage system that actually makes invisible copies. We call this safeguarded copies. And let me just bring this up here just for a second here. So, let me make sure this is widescreen. Fantastic. So what is useful in the DS8? Making copies. Okay, now this doesn't go back to my audits, but this does give you a virtual gap of sorts. Not a true air gap, but a virtual gap. So basically, instead of taking your flash copies or your snapshot space, I'm going to make a separate set of copies that I can then recover somewhere else. So this is an immutable set of copies from an existing volume that doesn't consume the rest of them, but it will be available to you in a case of emergency. So it is a, without going to tape, without going back to your air gap, which is slower, right? I can pull back some of these volumes somewhere else against bad actions. Some people argue this is too little too late. Some people talk about that, how do you know that they're infected or not? This doesn't worry about infection. This immediately gives, shall we say, the peace of mind that you have up to 500 copies of a particular volume. That's not bad, but it is something cool. Now, where are we going with this? We're also going to move to digital signatures. Now you're talking. Inoculation. So in other words, once you bless a particular volume or an image, we'll add signatures and we'll be able to say this is a known good. We've verified it, we've audited, we've investigated this. So that is a good point that's coming up and stuff like that. Just making sure you guys see that. All right. Oh, it didn't switch over. Hang on, let me make sure here. Hang on for 1 second here. Let me switch back. Great, here we go. Yes, use tape. Spectrum Protect and Spectrum Protect Plus now have algorithms that when they're doing their backups, They will start looking for encrypted files, and they'll actually start warning you saying, hey, the backup is changing. It's changed significantly since last time. Maybe you want to take a look at that. Now remember, that's a good way to stop malware in its tracks. Look at your backups. If the backups change dramatically, that's a key thing. Now, IBM does have some other services. I'm not trying to sell you on those services or anything like that. I'm going to bring them up just because I do have a paycheck from IBM. But they're the same things you can do yourself. And in this presentation, I will show you how to do it yourself if you want. So, sorry about that. Let me just make sure here. Jeez, a little bit fast there. Okay. So one of those. We have Resiliency Orchestration. We have this as a service and also as a product. So basically, we will take snapshots of all of your configurations. Good. So you can tell IBM, hey, here's my known series of switches, servers, all my data center stuff. Keep that safe. And then if you make a change, IBM can then recover back and say, hey, wait a second, why are you changing some of these configurations that you said were known good? Remember, an attacker will try to subvert a firewall setting. We'll try to subvert a server setting, a software setting. We can actually take care of that. That's the key thing here with Zerto. We're actually going to use as a hypervisor. We'll be able to start taking a look at all those settings and be able to say, hey, are you sure you want to do that? Great. I get it. Now, we also offer that for data. So if you want to write a check instead of doing this in-house, I get it. We'll do copy data management. We'll implement air gaps. We'll do that in immutable storage, like the DS8 safeguarded copy. I get it. Or many, many copies, flash copies, snapshots. So I'm giving you many different options, and I'll show you how to do it yourself in just a second here. How to do it yourself. Welcome to the IBM way. Here's your volume. Take a whole bunch of snapshots and have separate servers, separate facilities that you know are in a pristine or inoculated, immutable state that you can then restore to, because you don't want to obviously reinfect yourself. So here it is, one particular slide about how to make your own air gap. Great. Now you say to me, hey, Andrew, you talked to me about everything else. Where's the rest of it? Operating systems. One, use checksums. They're provided by every patch manufacturer and all the other fun stuff for any operating system. Same thing for databases, and I'll get to that next. So you can actually scan your entire file system and then look for various different things, even databases. And I'll get into that in another one. So as you can see, this one right now is for our friend SQL. But I'll go through more. I can do it on Oracle. So I don't care what database you're using. I don't care if it's DB2, if it's Oracle or it's SQL. I can actually look through and find any anomaly and then say, wait a second. That's why I bring up an example about splitting your database group in two. Having one group check the other's work for any weird macros or triggers or table steps, because that is how some of the biggest heists have gone without criminal being identified. Came from within. This is at a U.S. bank. A U.S. bank had a contractor and a simple storage provisioning request went wrong. The normal storage administrator was on vacation. They brought in somebody else. They followed the run book, but officially that person tried to do something that they shouldn't have, and that was a 6-hour outage. Not good. People wanted to see a sequel. I've given you now the actual script for SQL that you could easily use on Oracle or DB2 to actually take a look at looking at all of your tables, looking for anything that's out of the ordinary. And think about this. If you do this once a week, once a month, to prevent an intrusion or malware, it's priceless. Literally priceless here. Now, but wait, I got better stuff. You say, oh, wait, okay, that's nice for databases. What about all my cool little hardware toys? I know, I get it. Cisco will love to sell you their IDS or Juniper or some of the other folks, the intrusion detection system. And yeah, they're great, but what about free? That's right. Right now you can download Snort, which will do a lot of that for free for you on your own network. Great, the network, fantastic. The network is one of the biggest hacks. Like I told you about your Wi-Fi on your phone and stuff like that. Please, if you don't know the Wi-Fi, you shouldn't be using it. And that's part of the reason why how air gaps can be compromised. So I want you to see that at your data center, Wi-Fi can actually be used against you from the parking lot. I know it sounds crazy, but crazy. And to your point, how do you think this got its name? right? It came from you guys. Sorry. I'm sorry if this is a bad news kind of situation, but wait, I've got a better one for you too. You think you're safe with optical cables? No! I actually have this wonderful video here that shows how someone coming in to repair some of your equipment could hook on that simple device and make copies of everything on your optical cables. They have a notebook like all the other technicians do. They look like a normal technician. They hook on this device, which doesn't impair the optical fiber at all, but makes a copy of everything to their notebook. Wow. All they need to know is where that financial set of servers are or VMs are, and they have a copy of all that data. Think about that, right? So they don't have logins. They don't have keys to the kingdom. They don't have a business economic compromise or anything like that. All they have is a simple little copying device in their notebook, and they have a key, if not many keys to your kingdom. So encrypt, yes, please. The big part of this slide is I love encryption. I know that it takes away from deduplication and compression. I know, I get it. The problem is if you don't encrypt, something like this can easily be done, and they're doing this. By the way, that device is less than $50. $50 to make a copy of everything that's going on your optical cables? Come on, right? Bad macros, I think everyone knows this one. You know, careful of that Word file, careful of that PDF. I get it. Writing better software to prevent this. The problem is time's against us. It takes time to write that code and to update against certain things. And also, what we've also seen now is that once a contractor or someone else less savory will put in bad HTML inside a corporate website. So even though they're inside the corporate website, they're not subsuming the external website. They'll actually go to the payroll internal website or something else, and they'll grab credentials. Think about it that way. So if they have access to an internal web server that people normally authenticate their passwords to, they will actually harvest those credentials. We call this the evil HTML for a reason, or cross-site scripting, because once it grabs those credentials in a normal box that everyone's already familiar with the right lock icon, it'll go to another site that the hacker has, or that savory individual or less savory individual. It's not a big payload. Take a look. That's why we like audits. It's a simple line of text that will easily take from those passwords that the person has put in normally, like they normally should for a payroll, for an HR function, for whatever, and it'll send them somewhere else. Now, how do I go against this? So IBM has QRadar and some other stuff, but you know what? Who I love is these guys, Varonis. And I guarantee you, if you call up Varonis and you get their 30-day demo, you'll be shocked. And here's the other thing that really, if you need to get budget or if you need to get action from people, let them do the Varonis demo. Varonis will give a 30-day trial. This installs on your Active Directory or your AD server or your LDAP, and it watches every single user action. Now wait, that's a huge audit. That's a lot of noise. Wait, it gets better. It then starts looking for who somebody is based on their organizational unit, like an engineering or HR, and watching what they're doing on the permissions, as well as deletes or just even opens. It then creates a baseline for everybody, every entity in your organization, and then starts watching when people go off that baseline, giving you this. In other words, who's using what data and when. That's awesome. So forget just the database, for example. I'm now able to go through everything a user is doing on a particular workstation, series of servers, the entire network, regardless of where that network is globally. So by actually doing audits, smart audits, I would argue, of your Active Directory, your LDAP and logins, transparently, you are doing this. You are creating an immune system, like our body, to fight off bad things, either acquired or innate. Now, I brought this up because people are like, what are you talking about, Lance? It's the same thing. Everything we just talked about is the same way our body actually responds to a threat, basically. Whether it's internal, external, and then how it comes into our body, and then how we fight it off. Now, let me actually go into a little bit more details here. I mentioned before, I've said it many times, and here's some of those solutions I just talked about. Varonis starts building a nice immune system for your entire application, and environment. Everything. Now, QRadar and some of the other products do this too. The reason I like these is you don't have to do anything. It's building this up from AI. It's watching activity, looking at normal rules, as well as things that look a little weird, and it's only sending you alerts when it's out of the baseline. That's good, and it's always learning. The minute you see something that it doesn't like, you're getting the flag, and then you can say, oh no, that's normal behavior, go ahead, and it learns from all this. AKA access control lists, which is exactly what ransomware malware is doing. It's actually changing the file, changing the permission, encrypting it, deleting it, rewriting it, all of these key things here. So, but you tell me, Andrew, you told me I could do this for free. You're absolutely right. Here we go. Tripwire, syslog, snort. There's lots of individual components that will do this at their individual micro layers that you can do for free. It just takes time and a little bit of effort, and then you have to process all that. Or you go for some of the bigger solutions which will actually automate all that. I know it's an investment, but to prevent this is a key thing. And as part of that, if you're going to do your own, you are really starting your own security information event manager or management center. And it's going to take everything in from all your devices, from your firewalls, from all those logs, from all those servers, web servers, database servers, etc. And it's going to look and try and then give you a dashboard. So some of these are for free. Some of these are not free. They're commercial. But I'm just making sure. But the key thing is that it will collect it all in. Now, if you want, by the way, as I promised you, Splunk. Splunk, as you know, you can get for free. You can easily use that as your SIEM. So you can actually start sending by a syslog all of your database servers, all of your OS servers, all your other fun stuff. And Splunk will actually give you a lot of noise, but it will actually help start filtering it all out, and you can actually start programming in all these various event stuff yourself for free. Or Varonis. I love it. I give them credit. Look at this. It actually built up from a sales rep and nicknamed her Malware Molly, right? That she's a sales rep, but all of a sudden she had some really crazy things going on her workstation based on some of the clicks she did. Maybe she clicked on the wrong email, and we know about it now. That's how cool it is. Let me make sure you guys see this. But we're not the only ones. Splunk's out there, IBM with our QRadar and all the other fun stuff, right? Yes, I give you a link to everybody as well, so you can actually see cool stuff. Well, I've got other folks who are coming up, basically doing the same thing. And if you don't like doing it yourself, take a look. The baseline versus once somebody does something that's crazy, like, and I'll bring up the Hollywood example, if you could. The reason I got introduced to Varonis over, 15 years ago. By the way, Microsoft still hasn't bought this company. As far as I'm concerned, they should have been bought many years ago. So basically, in Hollywood, everyone's seen a Hollywood movie in the last 5-6 years, probably, yeah. You have some folks who create special effects. They like to put their own signature on those special effects. They are contractors, though, by design, so they only work on a movie-by-movie basis. They take their work with them, but Hollywood doesn't like that. Hollywood wants to have their own stamp. So many of the rendering houses use Varonis because the minute someone's about to leave, they'll normally take a dump of their entire directory of files as a read. They're not necessarily deleting them, but that activity shows up as Varonis, like, hey, all of a sudden Joe just did a dump of a series of directories he normally doesn't ever do, and that's outside the baseline. They get the alert and they know that Joe might be leaving the company or might be doing something special with all those files. That same thing for Hollywood applies to anyone else in any corporation. A financial analyst, an engineer. Why would an engineer all of a sudden take a huge dump of a whole bunch of directories that he normally hasn't in the weeks past? It could be normal. You're right, it could be. The key thing is at least now you've got an alert that you can say, hey, Joe, what are you doing? Was this authorized? Maybe Joe didn't even know he was doing it. Remember, Joe could be infected, and those events could be happening in the background on his computer or his phone. So you can see where some of these come into their own. So part of do-it-yourself. The other thing that Varonis does that the other guys don't do as well, but QRadar and some of the other guys do, is when they do their audits, they immediately start saying, wait a second, you have too many permissive rights. You should start locking down so that a user can't get to certain parts of this network or certain servers if they're not part of that organization. So again, no one needs to be root all the time. I get it, most of you guys know this one, but you'd be amazed at how much network freedom that people have, right? Even at IBM, it's amazing that I can get to many parts of IBM that maybe I shouldn't just because it's open. So some people say to me, what about jump boxes? Anyone know how big on jump boxes in the room? No? You know what? Want me to go into jump boxes? So basically, jump boxes are similar to TeamViewer. In other words, from my local workstation, I will use VNC or RDP or TeamViewer or log me in. You get the idea. Basically, I will grab control in a certain protocol, a certain port of another box. Now that box doesn't have any other access. In other words, it really doesn't have a keyboard. It is locked down in a physical facility, and that box has access to your key financials or your servers or anything like that. And so the thinking is because since this one is locked away, no USB, no Wi-Fi, and you're only using one method to get to it, RDP or Remote Desktop Protocol, TeamViewer, which is encrypted, VNC or Virtual Network Computer or Connection, that you're safe. On the other hand, it has its own limitations, right? I mean, once an attacker knows that you're using a jump box, they'll obviously try to hack that jump box, or they'll try to hack your box to try to get to that jump box. I get it. But you can see how that is a way to stop it, right? It's better than just a simple firewall. It's limiting access to just one particular protocol to get to that box. And then inside that box, you then have to launch another set of credentials to get to the final keys to the kingdom, the database server, the OS server, the firewall, etc. Jump boxes. Some people love them, some people hate them. Banks are starting to do more of this because they saw that tellers, their workstations were being compromised, so they wanted to make sure those teller workstations were completely off. And if those tellers needed to do anything, they would have to go through a jump box. Not that they would actually get to the servers, but you get the idea that anything that's more sensitive, they would never have it on their local workstation. They'd have to go through a web interface or an RDP, a VNC. But the best part comes back to this. I would argue, please, by setting up audits where you're actually making sure of all your systems and known goods, and making sure also that they won't pick up the phone and give the passwords or usernames away, or by an email that looks like it should be a yes, but maybe you should just delete it. And by the way, testing this. Pilots do this all the time, by the way. I mean, for those of us who fly, you know they run through their checklists, even though they know it. Every flight, no matter how much they know that aircraft, they go through the entire checklist every single time. And I would argue to your DBAs, to your key financial stakeholders, do that same checklist before they send yes to an email or when they log into a system. Doctors, not as many times. But as a lifeguard, I was tested every year for my certifications, again, to make sure I knew exactly how to rescue people, stuff like that. And the key thing is it all starts from an email. You saw earlier, honeypots. I just want to make sure you guys knew about that. So some of the places that offer their services, and you can do it yourself, they will on purpose name some of their servers something so obvious so that in case you are hacked or they're hacked, they will go to that honeypot instead of the real server. So in other words, let's just say you have an Exchange server. They would call the real Exchange server, they'd call it server 5x45, but they would call the honeypot server Exchange 1. Ah, right? Make sure it looks so obvious that people would go to that one. Or for example, DB1 for a database server, right? Versus the obfuscated name of like 54 5xJY, right? I mean, something that doesn't make any sense whatsoever to a hacker, but from a honeypot perspective, they would go after that one instead. So if I could, I'm also, in case you're getting really excited about going after these guys, the problem is that in many jurisdictions, you'll be prosecuted. So let's just say you go on the offensive. You've got the proof, you've got the traces from your firewall, or maybe you know competence of my friends Varonis or XRadar or QRadar, all the other fun stuff that someone's been doing something bad. You can't go after them in many jurisdictions because you're considered a criminal yourself. You have to turn it over to other folks. I bring this up because this one guy in one of our biggest scientific labs in the United States, he caught a whole bunch of people coming in and he went after them he's now serving time because he went after another country, basically, but he had all the proof. And it makes me sad. I'm sorry, I'm giving you the links here and stuff like that. That it's interesting that you can attack, but depending on your local laws, you might actually be prosecuted for those attacks. Go figure that one out, right? And people wanted to see what that Google key looks like. Yes, and by the way, you know, other people talked about other biometrics, but we have evidence now that people have been unlocking people's phones from the hospital by putting their thumbs up to it or holding it up to their faces while they're unconscious. And yes, you saw in one of that Marvel movies where they cut out the guy's eye. So come on, I mean, so when you say to me, yeah, Andrew, forget those passwords, I'll use my eye, I'll use a fingerprint, Face ID, yeah, that's not really the end. It's not. It's good, but it's not perfect. It really isn't. And, you know, that's why, you know, even flying here, by the way, I had a facial ID to get on the plane and stuff like that. They didn't scan the boarding pass, they just scanned me. So I get it, it's nice, but I don't think it's foolproof. So again, in summary, please, it's a constant train and retrain because we, as humans, love to trust. It is inherent in the actual DNA versus other entities on this planet, bugs and all the other stuff. We trust inherently. So by teaching us not to trust certain things, you're going to limit that access. Do those audits of devices, of people, and all the other stuff, but not in a negative way, just to say, look, this is a known good. This is fine. This is fantastic. Using disparate systems. The minute, and people talked about hyper-converged. All right. Let's just talk about that for a second. Hey, let's put it all in one nifty little box. And so if that one nifty box gets hacked, I have access to your switches, your storage, and your operating system and your apps all at once, right? So hyperconverged is great. Don't get me wrong, it is very nice. On the other hand, by using disparate systems and groups, I'm going to limit the way a hacker would normally proceed and get access. And last but not least, just by thinking about this, just by taking this presentation and giving it to your CEOs and other employees, you can start doing your own response. If you don't have a plan in place and trying to do this after the fact, you are in trouble. So that's the other key thing I would have you think about, is that start using this as a nice blueprint to start thinking about how you would change, how you would modify, or what your plan of attack is to get things back, because City of Atlanta and most other places didn't even have a plan. And it doesn't have to have a complete fill in the blanks, at least you know what to do. And by considering everything now, you'll be all set. And if you don't believe me again, just making sure, look at this, right? It's key people. Start with these key stakeholders. Anyone who accesses the financials, engineering, super database users, right? That is the key people you start off with, because from one social media post, they might be SIM swapped or something like that, and everyone needs to be aware. So their administrative assistants, anyone who works with them. Yes, do I have references? Yes, do I have links? And yes, and I don't get any money from Varonis. Check out the IBM as well, but I guarantee you, I've been on too many calls where the Varonis guys will install as a demo, and then we never hear from them again because they're so scared. They're like, oh my God, it works so well. It's scary good. It really is. But it's, anyway, sorry, I appreciate them very much. So thank you very much. I hope that's been good. Questions, please? How am I doing on time? Did I go past? No, I'm good. Okay.